I think what's most important about somebody like James Wong Howe is their body of work. If you look at the variety of work, HUD, Sweet Smell of Success, and Old Man of the Sea, they're entirely different looking movies. He's kind of adapting his style, to further the script visually. Some cinematographers that get lucky and work with a director and do maybe one film or two films that you would say were kind of wonderful. But there's few cinematographers like James Wong Howe, Keizo Miyagawa, Greg Toland, obviously, Stanley Cortez, I mean, those are cinematographers who adapted their work for the script, for the story, for the director they're working with. Their work was changeable. They weren't just doing something by rote. I think, James Wong Howe stands out with those great cinematographers that had a range that left us with some wonderful image making on a variety of stories. I was somebody that was always very aware of overdoing things, of kind of fussing with the image when it wasn't necessary. And he spoke at length about how in his career he tried to cut things down. He tried to simplify his work. He didn't particularly like shooting color films, and he's known for having a big blow-up with a Technicolor technician, because in those days there would be somebody from the Technicolor world standing by the camera all the time, judging how the film was being shot and commenting on the lighting. But James Wong Howe has heard to say that he preferred shooting in black and white. And in fact, the choice of black and white is a starkness of the sort of Texas landscape. And I think there's a certain focus on the content black and white brings that maybe color can be a distraction. I think the opening of HUD not only sets up the story and the characters, it sets up the way the film is going to be told. It's very minimal style. It's very kind of composed shots, very little camera movement. We recognize the sort of empty town with no characters. It's early morning and people are getting up, but it's dusty. It reminds one now of The Last Picture Show, although written by the same author. It was obviously a much later movie. But they have very, very similar feelings in the way they're shot. I'm sure Bogdanovich, when he shot Last Picture Show, was very much influenced by HUD. They're both towns that are kind of marginal. You get the feeling of a world that's kind of going away. It's kind of in sense like a Peckinpah movie, The Ballad of Cable Hogue. You think you're in a kind of regular John Ford type Western, and then suddenly a car comes into shot, and Jason Robards ends up being run over by a car. I mean, it's that feeling that this is a world that's on its way out, HUD was a particular film because they were shooting in the Texas Panhandle. They spent 4 weeks in Texas shooting on location.
Okay, thanks for the lift.
Some days was intense sunlight, so if you see behind-the-scenes pictures of his style of lighting, I mean, the banks of brute arcs interspersed with a bank of silver reflectors that are just punching the actual sunlight back into the shot. It was a combination of trying to flatten the image in a very high contrasty sunlight and also to create this sort of depth of field, because most of the shots you see in the film have an incredible depth of focus. He was using a blue filter, whereas often you would use a yellow or a red filter on black and white to increase the contrast, particularly in the sky. He was using a blue filter because he wanted to bleach the skies out and give it this really kind of washed out quality. You've got to think back then, it was hard to get a brute arc out in the middle of nowhere back then. People wouldn't bother using it now. I mean, lighting has changed so much. Most people nowadays, well, me in particular, if you wanted to fill a face in and soften the shadows, you might use a very large reflector, like a big white sheet. You wouldn't necessarily use lamps. Most films of that time, when somebody's using a similar technique, you're kind of aware of it. You're aware that these characters are being lit with multiple sources. But James Wong Howe was a real master at it. There's actually one scene where you can see what's happening. He's using silver reflectors, and at one point the wind must blow one of the reflectors, and you get this little wobble of light going across the characters.
I never thought it'd be anything like that.
And obviously the director thought the performance was worth it, and the fact that there's this lighting aberration was not so important. What he was trying to do with the lighting was kind of fill in the faces. I mean, he still allowed the kind of contrast. You still see the difference between the sunlight and the shadow, but he was just trying to fill in the shadows a little bit. He wanted this very hot, bleached look.
Which one of you two is coming out of my house at 6 o'clock in the morning?
The film is kind of memorable for its use of two shots. It very rarely uses a close-up.
You still got that itch?
Off and on.
There's one scene where HUD and Alma are talking.
Well, let me know when it gets to bothering you.
And it cuts to two single close-ups, like that. But that's the only place in the movie that you see close-ups, other than somebody in the foreground of a two-shot in the same sort of size, but then they're always in focus with the person in the background.
I don't like sudden passes.
Police car, 16th Precinct, attention.
It's quite different than his other films, actually. If you look at Sweet Smell of Success, which is probably my favorite of his, really, which is much more noir in its style.
You're a prisoner of your own fears, your own greed and ambition. You're in jail.
You're blind, Mr. Magoo.
It's not that kind of widescreen use of the frame.
Sidney, I told you.
JJ, I swear to you on my mother's life, I wouldn't do that.
When the vet arrives to look at the sick cows, it's so simply shot. For the most part, it's done in wide multiple character shots, group shots. Sometimes Homer might be in the foreground in a sort of mid close-up, but you see the others in the background. It's always a connected shot. The only time anybody is in a shot by themselves is a single on HUD on Paul Newman.
They turn up sick, you kill them. That's right, isn't it, mister?
I think this just emphasizes the fact that he's the odd one out. He's the one that's against bringing the vet in this kind of feud with Homer. The camera doesn't move at all. There's one moment where it just slowly pushes in on a tighter three-shot as they're discussing the options of what to do. But otherwise, it's so simple. It's quite a lesson, really, I think.
Yeah, how about that?